Hi, I'm Alexandra Nicholas Kuhn, Executive Director for the Massillon Museum.
And I'm Stephanie Toole, Education and Outreach Manager for the Massillon Museum.
We're excited to welcome you to the virtual Northeast Ohio Region Poetry Out Loud Student Workshop.
We are thrilled to be working with you all again this year, students, arts organization leaders, and teachers alike.
And we hope to see you at the Massillon Museum, if not as a competitor, as a guest at any time. Admission to the museum is always free, or perhaps to help cheer on your fellow students in the Northeast Ohio region at the November 11th regional semifinals competition.
We are looking forward to working with Mary Ruth Camp, Poetry Out Loud coordinator for our region, who we will invite here to the front momentarily.
Thank you so much, and we hope that more than anything, you have fun.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Ruth Camp, and I am the Poetry Out Loud coordinator for Northeast Ohio with the Massillon Museum. And we're so glad that you're participating this year in Poetry Out Loud. So before I bring Jeff up, my colleague, I wanted to read a poem. I don't have it memorized, so I will put that out there right up front. But I wanted to read a poem that if I were choosing a poem to recite, I think one of the most important things, and one of the past Poetry Out Loud national champions actually said this, that you should love the poem that you choose. Love the poem that you choose and believe in the poem that you choose. And so I wanted to just share a poem that I love and believe in. So the poem is called About Standing in Kinship, and it's by Kimberly Blazier. We all have the same little bones in our foot, 26, with funny names like navicular. Together they build something strong. Our foot arch, a pyramid holding us up. The bones don't get casts when they break. We tape them, one phalange to its neighbor for support. Other things, like sorrow, work that way too. Find healing in the leaning, the closeness. Our feet have 1/4 of all the bones in our body. Maybe we should give more honor to feet and to all those tiny but blessed cogs in the world, communities, the forgotten architecture of friendship. About Standing in Kinship by Kimberly Blazier. So I know all of you will do much better with your recitations than I did. But I think that just the piece about this to just take to heart is to pick a poem that really resonates with who you are and what you want to portray to the audience. So at this point, I'm going to invite my colleague Jeff up. So I want to introduce my colleague Jeff.
Hi, Mary Ruth. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this. This is very interesting.
And could you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
My background is I've done a lot of theater my whole life, ever since I was in 6th grade. I was part of an improvisational comedy group for 23 years. A lot of it is just things that I've learned just for decades of performing. I'm not classically trained. I took some theater in college, but didn't graduate degree in theater. So
okay. Well, thank you for being here with us.
Sure.
So what Jeff and I are going to do, we're going to talk through the criteria that the judges will judge your recitations on. So you should all be familiar with the criteria, but we want to go through it each criteria one by one. And Jeff and I are going to just talk about things that we think of from our experience that we want to share with you, or tips or techniques.
Great.
So the first one is physical presence.
Physical presence. When you're on stage, or if you're performing, if you're reading, you want to be relaxed. You want to maintain your footing. Like one thing that I noticed for years, and a lot of people might catch themselves doing this, you'll notice that people shift their weight like this. I used to do it until I was watching a video of a performance, and I noticed that, and I was like, oh, that looks horrible. So I just found a spot, planted myself, especially if you're delivering a monologue, or in this case, if you're reading something, unless it causes there's a need for you to walk, just make sure that you stand for it. Your hands, if you're talking with your hands, if you're making a point, sure. Otherwise, you want to keep them loose and relaxed. Now you can't see my hands, but since I'm imagining that I'm speaking to a group of people, my hands are kept up front. I'm not putting them in my pocket. I'm trying not to slouch, and I'm trying to engage this room by looking around, even though there might not be a particular focus I have. I'm trying to at least engage with the audience, and if that's part of what you're doing, you want to make sure that you do that because you want to look comfortable.
I pick up on the word confidence comes to
Mhm.
mind. So having your feet planted gives you a sense of being grounded
Right.
and in the space.
And it might help even if you are nervous, and even if you're like your stomach is doing cartwheels and somersaults, it might help to focus you so that it gives you that confidence to breathe.
Yeah. Another thing, when you mentioned scanning the audience and you know, engaging with the audience, I wonder if you think, or from your experience, say you can actually see people,
Okay.
and you have someone in the audience that is a safe person for you. Would that be a potential helpful technique to make contact? You know,
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're in that way, that if you can, as long as you don't focus on that person, so it looks like you're reading this entire time, like I right now am speaking to the door right there. Oh, over here, Alex is like, what? Why aren't you paying attention to me? Well, I'm sorry. So I'll look over here. Even if I'm not going to look directly at her, I'm looking past her, or I'm over here looking at this person over here, or those people over there, or maybe the guy up in the rafter over there, that girl over there. At least if I'm not looking at them, you're giving the sense your audience can see that you are paying attention to them, and you're trying to make them feel included in the performance because that's what you want to do,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, but they're participating. as
Exactly,
well.
exactly.
Okay. Well, why don't we move to the next one? So the next one is voice and articulation.
Okay. Voice and articulation is something that's very important because if you're going to sit in and talk and mumble, people aren't going to be able to understand you, even if you have a microphone on. You want to make sure that your diction is clear. You want to make sure that you are understood. You don't want to give the impression that you're bored or that you're not, again, trying to engage your audience. There are vocal warm-ups that you can do. I don't have anything that I can think. There are like a lot of rhymes and limericks. I'm sure that a lot of you know. There's one that you need unique New York, and I probably just screwed that up, but I haven't done it in a few years. But there's a lot of times when you'll do vocal warm-ups just to get your voice ready. And a lot of singers, I think, will do that in musical theater.
And those are things that you could get on YouTube.
Sure.
All of you are very good at finding
Yes,
tools
absolutely.
like that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, go out there and find those techniques or those things that you can practice.
Yeah.
You practice your poem, but also practice some of the other
Practice,
skills.
yeah, practice your articulation, your pronunciation, your pauses.
Yes.
Especially if you're doing something that you want somebody to think about what you're doing and you want them to have an opportunity to take in those words and savor them and digest them. You want to pause just a little bit.
Yeah, I came across, and I'm gonna see if I have it.
Will this be the part where you're talking about like a count, an internal count of how to help yourself?
Right, yeah, so one of the techniques that I came across was giving yourself like for a comma, you would do 1 count. For a period, you would have count to 2 on the pause. So you could set up a little bit of a structure for yourself as you're practicing. And that could give your poem a little bit more of the spaciousness that it needs. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I thought of, and I'm doing it in my head right now.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you
You're
for
welcome
showing
for that
that
demonstration.
demonstration. Yes.
What did you want to go over next?
Well, we talked also, so with voice and articulation is the projection.
Right.
And I know I speak quietly, even if I have a microphone.
Right.
And so what are some ways that I could practice projecting?
One of the things that I think we did when we were talking was a game where you could be on one side of the room and the other and have a conversation with somebody. So not that you're yelling, you don't want to scream, but you also don't want to be so soft that you want to be able to have a conversation with someone, but not so they can hear you and you can have that conversation, but not forced, not like you're yelling. if anybody, if you've ever done anything on stage, you've probably heard project, project, project. But not in a way that it sounds manufactured or forced, so that it sounds natural, even when you're doing what they call a stage whisper. You know, you're whispering, but you can still be heard by the people in the very, very back. You know, that sort of thing. It's a performance trick that the audience understands this intuitively. You don't have to understand. If you've seen enough performance, you get it. That way you could, let's say you have a poem that you're reciting, and there's something that you want to get across, and you want it to be quiet, and you want it to be something that you want to think about, but you don't want to continue with the same. You could use your voice, modulate it, but give it a bit of a pause and lower the volume a little bit, but still be able to be heard. Does that make any sense?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Well, and I think about too, we talked about this a little bit in the last one, or well, actually the pause, and we're using the pause. And I think that poetry is written also, and I think this is something that you're all familiar with, but I just want to bring it back. That poetry is written in a way that it gives you the breaks. It like feeds that to you. It's like a freebie given to you. Like the line breaks are really important, and so I think you can use that as well.
Yeah, the poem
As
that
you're
you,
practicing.
the poem that you just read,
Mhm.
exactly, you know that the author of that poet, the poet gave you that to work with. So that's part of the interpretation of it as well.
Yes.
Segue.
Which is the next criteria, interpretation.
Yes.
So connected to loving the poem and believing in it is understanding the poem.
Correct,
Yes.
correct.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, because it's sort of like if you're, let's say, in a scripted play, or even in an improvised
Mhm.
situation, you're working with a character.
Yeah.
In a way. So I'm going to pick one of the poems that I've loved since a boy, which is The Raven by Poe. You need to read that in a way that when you read the poem, and especially if you're going to deliver it, you can't just throw it out there. You're dealing with someone who is melancholic, he's tortured, he wants to know from what he believes is this sign from this raven, what about his lost love, what's going on? And so you can't deliver it all happily and fantastically, but you don't want to be silly. It lends itself to the interpretation of it. What is this poem about? The poem that you read, again, that's another interpretation. You're talking about what sounds like, first you're talking about bones, but you're not talking about that. You're actually saying something about how we interact with each other as people interact, or communities or cultures. So that's another way to interpret it. I guess that's what you're looking at. You're looking at what's the piece about, what are you trying to say, or what is the poet trying to say, and then convey that.
Yeah. And one of the things that I came across and have tried to do for myself in reading poems. So one of the gifts of poetry is that you all are practicing is memorizing and reciting and getting into the poems that way. Reading poetry is so helpful in doing that, or in learning. And one of the things that you can do is take your poem and rewrite it in your own words. And that can be a technique to use to help you better understand the poem. So that's just one suggestion.
I agree.
Yeah. So then we're going to move on to the next criteria, which is evidence of understanding, which is very close to interpretation.
Right.
Linked.
Right. And that's, again, using the poem by Poe that I use, understanding what it's about. What is this poem about? Is it something like the poem that you read? Are you talking about bones and feet? Well, yes, but no. You're talking a lot more along the lines of interaction. That's where if you're reading your poem, it helps to digest it and figure out what is it about, what's the piece about. Just the same as a role in a play or a monologue, if you're doing a monologue, or reading a story. What is the author trying to say here?
Yep. And even down to the very specific knowing what each word means. There are words, medical terms or biological terms in that poem that I read that, if I wasn't familiar with them, I'd want to look them up and become familiar with them. So you
Right.
want to make sure that you know what the words are that you're.
Yeah, like the bone, the flambaduce bone.
That
whatever.
one, yes.
I don't even remember what it was. The flambaduces.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's go on to the last criteria, which is just overall performance.
Okay. The overall performance, you want to engage your audience. You want your audience to walk away. If this is what you're trying to do, you want your audience to feel that they have had a wonderful evening or afternoon, that they've enjoyed the time they've devoted to listen to this performance. For example, I'm performing right now. You know, I'm talking with you and we know each other, we're friends. I have no idea who I'm talking to, and it actually makes me a little nervous, but I'm performing right now. And that's hopefully you haven't noticed, that nobody out there has noticed, that I am kind of having the stomach
the
somersaults.
butterflies are
The
showing up.
butterflies a little bit, because you know, this is a new area for me, in the sense of I've never done anything like this. I've tried to give you some of my ideas since you asked me and were kind enough to invite me, but hopefully it hasn't been obvious that I'm like, what am I going to say? So
Yeah.
hopefully that's part of the overall, that's what I get at. If you're like, the poem that you read, it was, okay, that was something, that was a few minutes worth of thought there that was good. And I'm hoping that when you're reading your poems, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to engage your audience, hope that they give, that they weren't just wasting their time, that they enjoyed what you did.
Yeah.
And they enjoyed your reading of it.
And I think too, you've chosen a poem that you love, that you believe in, and so you also are honoring the poet and the poem and the ideas in the poem, and so you want your audience to leave understanding that as well. All right, so just a few things that recaps or things that we can work on between now and the semifinals. Practice.
Yes.
Practice.
Yes.
Practice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Rehearsal.
Yes. Another idea, a thing that you can do that we had talked about, is that you can record yourself and then you can listen back. And that can be very helpful, because you'll hear things that you don't pick up on just reciting to someone else. And so that's a tool or technique that you can use. It also helps you to listen, to see, okay, this is what that line means, but wow, I am not portraying that in how I recited that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. There's plays that I've done where I don't get the joke until maybe that's the second weekend. I've learned the line, but if I didn't understand the joke, I still deliver it. I'm like, why is the audience laughing?
Yeah.
And it has taken me that long before, oh, that's why, thank goodness that I was, and that adds to maybe sometimes getting feedback.
Yes.
Helping somebody, why is this line funny? Or in this sense, asking a friend, asking a neighbor, asking a loved one. Could you take a couple of minutes to listen to me with my recitation and tell me what you think? Tell me what was good, tell me what was bad, right?
Yeah, I think that is a wonderful way to just strengthen your poem, your recitation. And I think, as Alex mentioned earlier, a lot of this is also just to play and have fun as well. So we want to reinforce that.
Yep. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you,
Massillon
Jeff.
Museum.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun.
Okay, so what we want to show you next, last year, the winner of the Northeast Ohio Regional competition was Emily McNeil, and she was kind enough to give us a taste of how and what the Poetry Out Loud meant to her, and what the experience gave to her as a fellow human being. So we wanted to share that.
I appreciate that Poetry Out Loud gave me a chance to share these poems that I've loved for years. Since 7th grade, I've been in love with poetry, and I started memorizing it as just a way to keep it with me wherever I went. And it was just something for me. And then I realized that it gave so much more meaning to the poems to share them with other people and to share what they meant to me. So I really enjoyed that Poetry Out Loud allowed me to do that.
And next, we're going to just introduce the space that you'll be in. We had wanted to give a tour. We just have a few photos that we want to share with you to show you the space and just so you can kind of picture where you'll be. So there will be a short stage. There will be a microphone. The audience obviously is there, and the table, there were 2 tables with the judges, the accuracy judge that you can cue if you need. And yeah, so this is the space that you'll be in at the Massillon Museum. And I think we have a picture of Emily last year in her performance. All right, so what we're going to move to next, I'm going to invite Jeff to come back up. And we are going to watch a couple of the recitations from previous national champs, I think. And after we watch each recitation, yes, Jeff.
Oh, I heard an invitation.
You are welcome here.
Thank
Yes,
you.
yes. So we're going to watch the recitations, and then we'll talk about what we noticed in these recitations, what we think was done well or could have been done better.
Okay.
So we'll see. So we'll go ahead and watch the first recitation. Yes, you're getting ready, aren't you?
We're getting ready. Let's go. Ready to eat some poetry.
Bilingual, bilingüe, Barrina espiat. My father liked them separate. One there, one here. Allá y aquí. As if aware that words might cut into his daughter's heart, el corazón, and lock the alien part to what he was, his memory, his name, su nombre, with a key he could not claim. English outside this door, Spanish inside, he said, y basta. But who can divide the world, the word mundo y palabra, from any child? I knew how to be dumb and stubborn, testaruda. Late, in bed, I hoarded secret syllables I read until my tongue, mi lengua, learned to run where his stumbled. And still the heart was one. I like to think he knew that, even when proud, orgulloso of his daughter's pen. He stood outside mis versos, half in fear of words he loved but wanted not to hear.
Okay.
Hmm.
So, Jeff,
Yeah.
one of the things that I noticed was the change in emotion, both reflected on her face,
Yeah.
but also in how her voice changed.
Yes.
That she did that very well with this poem.
Yes. One of the things that I was looking at was her physical presence, her using her hands,
Mhm.
using her face. She was looking, and when her mood changed, at one point she was reflecting. She looked up to the sky, and you could tell by the way she paused and the way her vocal inflection was. She was reflective, and then she was back.
Mhm.
That was, I think, everything that we talked about earlier. She caught.
Yeah, it was
It was,
very well done.
yeah, agreed.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and watch the second one.
Forgetfulness by Billy Collins. The name of the author is the first to go, followed obediently by the title, the plot, the heartbreaking conclusion, the entire novel, which suddenly becomes one that you have never read, never even heard of, as if one by one the memories you used to harbor decided to retire to the southern hemisphere of the brain, to a remote fishing village where there are no phones. Long ago, you kissed the names of the 9 muses goodbye and watched the quadratic equation pack its bag. And even now, As you memorize the order of the planets, something else is slipping away. A state flower, perhaps. The address of an uncle. The capital of Paraguay. Whatever it is you are struggling to remember, it is not poised on the tip of your tongue, or even lurking in some obscure corner of your spleen. It has drifted off down a dark, mythological river, whose name begins with an L as far as you can recall. On your own way to oblivion, where you will join those who have even forgotten how to swim and how to ride a bicycle. No wonder you rise in the middle of the night to look up the date of a famous battle in a book on war. No wonder the moon in the window seems to have drifted out of a love poem you used to know by heart.
All right. So very different poem, very
Mhm.
different presentation.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It was interesting. He was very kept in his space.
Mhm.
He was there. And I noticed he articulated, he did engage the audience as well. He was looking. I guess I was a little, I was intrigued that the way he delivered some of the lines, there was laughter, and it was part of the, I thought that was nice, but I don't think that that was necessarily the way he delivered it. Or actually, the way he was delivering it, I was a little puzzled by later. The first time I thought it was funny.
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe there was something I didn't get out of it, but I thought it was more reflective of what it must be like to, to start to forget things. It's like,
Mhm.
oh gosh,
Mhm.
there's a point when, yeah, it's funny at first, and then you're like, oh geez.
Mhm.
So I don't know. That's just me.
Well, I think the audience, he definitely acknowledged the audience participation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so he did really well at responding to the audience in that sense and giving them time.
Yeah.
And potentially reinforced or played off of that a little bit because the audience was responding with laughter.
Yeah, and maybe that was it, because it was such, little nuggets they were getting. It did elicit.
People recognized
Yeah.
or could, oh yes, I just did that the
Mhm,
other day. Or I just,
yeah,
yeah. Definitely different physical, the physical presentation was different, but he seemed very comfortable.
yeah, there was nothing wrong.
Yeah.
I can think what I was talking about is just my personal reaction to it.
Mhm.
I guess I laugh, I thought it was amusing at first, and then I was starting to think more from past experience with
Mhm.
other people in my life, and it's like, oh geez.
Mhm. So that's interesting that his presentation and the audience interaction, what it left you with was something to kind of consider
Yeah,
later, which
yeah.
is maybe one of the things that you want to offer the audience.
Yeah, no, he was,
Yeah.
I thought he did a great job. He did a fantastic job. It was
Yep.
completely different,
Yes.
different type of poem too.
So embody the poems the way that you need to
Mhm.
or want to. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Sure.
And we're gonna go ahead and. Okay, so thank you for your time today. And thank you, Jeff and Alex and Stephanie and all of you students and teachers for being a part of this. What we want to do just last is just recap a few logistics for you. So the important date coming is November 11th, the Northeast Ohio Regional Semifinal here at the Massillon Museum starts at 2 o'clock. So keep that. We will be sending an email out after with this recording. You will also get the school champion sheet, which clarifies and is a way for us to gather information about you and your school, the poems that you're going to be reciting. So note this, you'll want 3 poems. So you have your poem from the local competition, your school competition. You'll have a second poem when you come to regional, so you'll have those 2. And then when if and when you go to state, if you're chosen, you'll need a third poem. So you'll want to choose 3. There is time between the semifinals and the state championship to continue to work and refine those poems, but you'll want to have 3. And let's see, the semifinals, we have wonderful judges lined up, and we also have the Upriver Drifters. It's a local band that will be playing. So encourage friends and family to come. It's going to be a fun event. They'll get to see you perform and get to hear a expansive different poems and just enjoy an afternoon together. So a note on presentation. So this is something we did not mention. So with you get to choose what to wear. The encouragement is to be professional, dress well, but don't choose something that could be distracting and take away from the poem or the poems that you're reciting. So just keep that in mind. And I think those are all of the details that I wanted to give you. If we think of anything else though, we are going to send you an email. We'll include all the information there. And if you have questions, know that you can always contact us. POL@massillonmuseum.org is the email address. And you can call us if you have questions as well. So thank you again and good luck.